One sits alone on an island in the cold waters of San Francisco Bay. The other rises from the Colorado Desert, engineered with some of the most advanced security systems in the world. Alcatraz was once called escape-proof. ADX Florence is known today as the most secure federal prison in America. But how do they truly compare? In design, in philosophy, and in legacy? Today, we break down the real differences behind two of the most famous high-security prisons in United States history. Before we begin, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Now, let's get started. For more than a century, the United States has built correctional facilities that reflect the fears, technologies, and philosophies of their time. Among all of them, two stand above the rest in public imagination: Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary and the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility, better known as ADX Florence. Though separated by decades, geography, and purpose, both institutions came to represent the highest levels of security the nation could engineer. Yet the way they achieved that reputation could not be more different. Alcatraz opened in 1934, during a period when the federal government sought a place to hold inmates considered too difficult to manage elsewhere. Its isolated location on an island in San Francisco Bay made it a natural symbol of containment. The prison relied on physical barriers, heavily controlled movement, and the surrounding water to reinforce its security. Over time, it became known as the Rock, a name that captured both its physical presence and its psychological impact. But despite its reputation, Alcatraz was not designed with modern technology. Instead, it depended on strict routine, direct supervision, and the natural advantages of geography. By contrast, ADX Florence, which opened in 1994, reflect a completely different era in correctional philosophy. Built in the high desert of Colorado, ADX was conceived not as an island fortress, but as a facility where architecture and technology work together to create a controlled environment. Its operation emphasizes precision, electronic monitoring, restricted movement protocols, and an infrastructure intentionally designed to reduce interaction. Instead of relying on natural isolation, ADX relies on engineered isolation, a concept rooted in modern correctional standards and federal policy. Comparing Alcatraz and ADX Florence is not simply a matter of asking which prison was tougher. Their purposes evolved from different needs, shaped by the times in which they were built. Alcatraz was intended to solve a 20th century problem, consolidating high-risk inmates in a single, easily controlled location. ADX, on the other hand, was created to handle the highest federal security classifications using modern tools, specialized housing units, and a more advanced approach to risk management. Together, these facilities tell a story about how the United States has responded to security challenges across generations. One prison became a cultural icon, featured in films, books, and public tours. The other remains active today, largely shielded from public access, known for its focus on strict structure and controlled movement. Understanding them side by side provides insight not only into correctional design, but into how society's priorities have changed over time. In this documentary, we compare their histories, operations, philosophies, and legacies, and explore what made each of them stand out as symbols of maximum security. To understand why Alcatraz and ADX Florence became symbols of extreme security, we first have to look at where they were built and how their designers intended them to function. Each facility reflects a very different philosophy about what makes a prison secure. Alcatraz began with geography. Located 1.25 miles off the coast of San Francisco, the island had long been considered a naturally fortified space. Long before it became a federal penitentiary, it served as a military prison, and the U.S. government recognized the island's potential as a place of containment. The cold, fast-moving waters surrounding Alcatraz were seen as an additional barrier, discouraging escape attempts without needing advanced technology. In the 1930s, this combination of isolation and physical distance represented an ideal solution to security concerns. Because of this location, the design philosophy of Alcatraz was straightforward: use nature as the primary defense. The prison itself was built with thick concrete walls, barred windows, and multiple checkpoints, but its designers always understood that the island was doing most of the work. Movement was tightly regulated through scheduled routines, guard oversight, and a centralized cell block. Alcatraz had little in the way of technological systems by modern standards. Instead, it relied on human supervision and the surrounding environment to maintain order. ADX Florence represents an entirely different approach. It was built not in the middle of water, but in the open landscape of Colorado's high desert. At first glance, the location appears ordinary, far from any major city, but not naturally isolated. Yet this was intentional. The designers of ADX did not want geography to be the main source of security. Instead, they sought to create a facility where architecture and technology serve as the core defense systems. This new philosophy emphasized controllable, predictable environments over natural barriers. The layout of ADX Florence reflects this engineered approach. The facility was designed with multiple security layers, each one reinforcing the next. Corridors, perimeter structures, and housing units follow a secure-by-design philosophy, meaning the architecture itself limits unauthorized movement. Electronic systems, cameras, and controlled entry points are integrated into daily operations. Where Alcatraz relied on water and distance, ADX relies on precision engineering and technological oversight. These contrasting philosophies reveal how correctional design has evolved over time. Alcatraz demonstrated the 20th century belief that isolation, physical and environmental, was the strongest security tool available. ADX Florence, built 60 years later, reflects a modern belief that security can be achieved through controlled environments, standardized procedures, and advanced monitoring systems. Both approaches were effective for their respective eras, but they illustrate how societal expectations and institutional standards have changed. Ultimately, the locations of Alcatraz and ADX Florence tell us more than just where these prisons exist on a map. They reveal how the United States shifted from relying on natural isolation to relying on engineered systems. And while the two facilities take opposite paths to achieve security, both became symbols of the highest levels of control in their time. Daily life inside Alcatraz and ADX Florence reflects not only different eras in correctional history, but also different goals. One relied heavily on routine and human supervision. The other uses modern systems designed to standardize day-to-day operations. Although their environments were built decades apart, both were structured around predictability, oversight, and strict schedules, foundations of high security management. At Alcatraz, life was organized around a traditional prison schedule. Inmates lived in small individual cells arranged along the main cell house, which followed a straightforward block layout. Each day followed a regulated routine that included meals in the dining hall, scheduled work assignments, and designated recreation periods. Movement was conducted in groups and overseen directly by officers stationed throughout the facility. Despite its reputation in popular culture, much of life at Alcatraz centered on structure rather than harshness. Predictability was considered essential, and the prison's leadership believed that a stable daily rhythm contributed to safety and order. The environment at Alcatraz was also shaped by the limited technology of its time. Nearly every aspect of supervision depended on guard presence, observation, and radio communication. Officers controlled access points, monitored hallways, and ensured compliance with scheduled activities. The island's isolation acted as an additional stabilizing force. With fewer external variables, the daily routine could be enforced consistently. Though strict, the system reflected the era's broader approach to incarceration, a focus on discipline, routine, and physical oversight. Daily life at ADX Florence follows a very different model. Designed with a modern philosophy of containment and controlled environments, ADX uses architecture and technology to structure daily activities. Movement is highly regulated through electronic systems, automated checkpoints, and carefully planned schedules. Rather than relying primarily on large groups or shared spaces, Daily routines are built around minimizing unsupervised interaction and emphasizing individualized management. Meals, outdoor exercise, and programming follow federal policy standards, but with procedures tailored to the facility's security level. Activities occur on a consistent schedule, with timing designed to reduce overlap and maintain order. Officers monitor operations through a combination of direct supervision and electronic systems that support communication, door controls, and security checks. This creates a controlled environment where routine is not only scheduled, but also technologically reinforced. While Alcatraz depended on physical barriers and human oversight, ADX uses systemized processes to maintain predictability. Yet, in both places, structure remains central. Schedules help create a stable rhythm, allowing staff to monitor operations and reduce disruptions. The consistency of daily routines reflects a core belief shared across generations of correctional management. Stability contributes to safety. Comparing daily life in these two facilities highlights how incarceration has evolved from a human-centered model to a technology-supported one. Alcatraz's routines were shaped by the limitations and practices of the 1930s. ADX Florence represents a more modern approach, where the environment itself plays an active role in shaping day-to-day operations. Despite these differences, both institutions demonstrate how routine, whether enforced by geography, staff presence, or technology, remains essential to the function of high-security prisons. Security lies at the core of both Alcatraz and ADX Florence, but each prison approaches that goal through entirely different philosophies and technologies. Alcatraz relied on natural barriers and human oversight, while ADX Florence represents the modern era of engineered control. Comparing their security features shows how far correctional design has evolved across 6 decades. At Alcatraz, the foundation of security was its isolated location. The cold waters of San Francisco Bay served as a natural perimeter, eliminating the need for modern electronic systems. Within the prison, the design followed a straightforward system of layered barriers, thick concrete walls, steel doors, barred windows, and a clear, linear layout that allowed officers to visually monitor movement. The cell house itself was compact and built with long sight lines, making it easier for staff to observe activity from a single point. Technology at Alcatraz was minimal by today's standards. Security checks, head counts, and movement control relied heavily on staff presence. Officers monitored corridors, secured access points, and conducted regular inspections. Locks were mechanical, gates were manually operated, and communication was handled through radios and direct reporting. The overall philosophy was simple: clear visibility, strict routine, and the constant presence of trained staff. Even without advanced systems, this model was effective for its era because it matched the technology available and leveraged the island's isolation. ADX Florence introduces a completely different level of security, one shaped by modern engineering and federal correctional standards. The facility was designed so that every part of the structure contributes to controlled movement. The perimeter includes multiple security layers, each one reinforced by technology and architecture. Observation systems, controlled entry points, and monitored corridors ensure that movement happens only when authorized and only along designated routes. Inside the facility, the architecture supports a philosophy known as secure by design. This means that the layout itself reduces the possibility of unauthorized interaction or movement. Electronic systems handle door controls, surveillance, and communication, allowing staff to coordinate operations with precision. Cameras, sensors, and automated systems enhance visibility, providing consistent monitoring throughout the facility. These tools are integrated into daily routines, supporting both safety and operational efficiency. While Alcatraz depended on officers stationed at key points, ADX uses a combination of direct supervision and technology-assisted oversight. Staff remain central to all security procedures, but they are supported by modern tools that help ensure accuracy and consistency. This reduces reliance on manual observation and creates a layered approach where architecture, technology, and routine all work together. Another key difference lies in how each facility manages movement. At Alcatraz, movement was conducted through scheduled group activities, controlled by officers in hallways and at checkpoints. At ADX, movement follows highly regulated protocols managed through electronic controls and coordinated communication among staff. The goal is to keep transitions predictable and organized, minimizing unpredictable variables. The contrast between the two facilities reflects the broader evolution of correctional security. Alcatraz embodied early 20th century beliefs that isolation, direct supervision, and physical barriers were the strongest tools available. ADX Florence represents a modern approach where technology, architecture, and standardized systems work together to maintain order. Both approaches were considered state-of-the-art for their time, and both helped shape the public perception of maximum security prisons in the United States. Ultimately, comparing these two institutions highlights how security is not defined by a single method. It is shaped by the era, the available technology, and the goals of correctional policy. Alcatraz used nature and structure. ADX uses engineering and precision. Together, they illustrate the evolving standards of high-security facility design. Both Alcatraz and ADX Florence became widely known not only for their security features, but also for the inmates they housed. Over time, these institutions gained reputations as homes for individuals deemed particularly difficult to manage elsewhere. However, it is important to focus on the impact of these facilities and their security philosophies, rather than the details of crimes. Alcatraz housed some of the most well-known inmates of its era. Names such as Al Scarface Capone and George Machine Gun Kelly became synonymous with the prison, not because of their actions inside the facility, but because Alcatraz represented a place where high-profile inmates could be contained under strict supervision. The federal government intentionally selected prisoners who required a higher level of security, and the prison's reputation grew as these individuals became public figures. The combination of isolation, controlled routines, and visible oversight made Alcatraz a model for handling inmates who could not be managed in other institutions. ADX Florence, in contrast, was built with a modern understanding of security classification in mind. It houses inmates who require the highest levels of supervision within the federal system. Individuals such as Terry Nichols, convicted in connection with a nationally significant case, and others classified under the administrative maximum system, are examples of the type of inmates for whom ADX is designed. Like Alcatraz, the notoriety of the inmates contributed to the public perception of the facility, but the focus of ADX is primarily operational, to maintain safety and order through strict adherence to controlled procedures. While both prisons have held well-known figures, the difference lies in approach and context. Alcatraz became famous partly because of its cultural presence and the public's fascination with high-profile criminals. The island's isolation and the stories surrounding escapes reinforce the image of a nearly impenetrable institution. In contrast, ADX Florence remains largely inaccessible to the public, and its notoriety comes more from its security philosophy than from specific inmates' fame. This difference illustrates how public perception of high-security prisons has shifted over time, from fascination with daring inmates to respect for the systems that contain them. It is also important to note that being a famous inmate does not necessarily define the daily life or operations of the facility. In both Alcatraz and ADX, policies were applied consistently, with security and routine shaping the environment more than individual personalities. Staff at each facility were trained to maintain order and enforce regulations regardless of the notoriety of particular inmates. By examining the types of inmates housed in these institutions, we gain insight into the reasoning behind high-security design. Alcatraz reflected the federal government's need to manage difficult prisoners in the early 20th century, using isolation and routine as primary tools. ADX Florence reflects a more modern approach, where architecture, technology, and strict protocols are integrated to manage high-risk individuals consistently and safely. Ultimately, the famous names associated with Alcatraz and ADX Florence serve as symbols, but the true story lies in the philosophy and operation of the facilities themselves. Each prison demonstrates how design, policy, and procedure work together to maintain order, regardless of the notoriety of those inside. When comparing Alcatraz and ADX Florence, one of the most striking differences lies in the role of technology. Each facility reflects the era in which it was built and the tools available to maintain security. While Alcatraz relied primarily on human oversight and natural barriers, ADX Florence represents a 21st century approach where systems and automation play a central role in controlling the environment. At Alcatraz, technology was basic but functional for its time. Mechanical locks, barred doors, and limited communication systems were complemented by routine patrols and guard towers. Surveillance relied almost entirely on line-of-sight observation. Even alarms and signals were mechanical or manually operated. This simplicity reflected the design philosophy of the 1930s. If you could see and control movement directly, the prison could function safely. Officers were the primary instruments of control, and the environment, the island's isolation, and the structure of the prison supported them. By contrast, ADX Florence integrates advanced technologies to enhance oversight, precision, and control. Electronic monitoring, automated door systems, and camera networks allow staff to manage movements with far greater accuracy. Sensors detect unauthorized access, while intercom systems facilitate instant communication throughout the facility. This combination of architecture and technology ensures that staff can observe and respond to nearly every area simultaneously, even without physical presence in every location. ADX Florence also demonstrates how technology has changed the management of inmate movement. In a facility of this design, doors can be programmed to open only at specific times, and staff can coordinate transitions through control rooms rather than relying solely on manual procedures. Even recreation and work periods are monitored and scheduled through integrated systems, reducing the likelihood of unexpected incidents. This level of technological integration allows for high security while maintaining standardized, predictable routines. The evolution from Alcatraz to ADX Florence highlights a broader trend in corrections, the shift from reliance on geography and staff observation to reliance on engineered systems. Alcatraz represented a world where human judgment and environmental control were sufficient. ADX Florence reflects a modern understanding that security can be optimized through technology, with staff acting as supervisors rather than the sole instruments of control. This technological transformation also illustrates how correctional philosophy has changed. Whereas Alcatraz depended on strict routines enforced by guards, ADX uses a combination of human oversight and digital systems to create layers of security. Monitoring, communication, and movement control are all integrated, reducing reliance on chance or human error. The result is a facility where predictability and control are built into the very infrastructure. Examining the technology of these two prisons shows how innovation reshapes security priorities. Alcatraz succeeded with what was available in the 1930s: isolation, observation, and mechanical systems. ADX Florence succeeds with advanced tools, integrated systems, and precise engineering. Together, they tell the story of how the United States has adapted to evolving challenges in corrections, demonstrating that the definition of maximum security is constantly changing. Operating a high-security prison requires more than just walls and guards. It demands extensive planning, staffing, and resources. Both Alcatraz and ADX Florence illustrate the unique challenges of managing maximum security facilities, though the nature of those challenges reflects the time and technology of each institution. Alcatraz, operating from 1934 to 1963, was expensive for its era, largely because of its location and isolation. Supplying an island prison required daily transportation of food, water, medical supplies, and equipment via ferry. Staff had to commute by boat, and emergency access was limited. The island's infrastructure also needed constant maintenance to withstand harsh weather and saltwater exposure. These logistical challenges made Alcatraz one of the costliest federal prisons to operate per inmate. Yet the expense was considered necessary to ensure containment of high-risk individuals. Staffing at Alcatraz was intensive. Officers had to maintain continuous oversight, both inside the cell blocks and on the island perimeter. Schedules were carefully coordinated to cover security posts, patrols, and administrative duties. Even with a relatively small inmate population, the island required a large complement of personnel to maintain routines and respond to emergencies. The cost of operating Alcatraz extended beyond finances. It involved balancing human resources, transportation challenges, and the complexities of managing a physically isolated environment. ADX Florence, in operation since 1994, represents a modern model of cost and operations. While not burdened by geographic isolation, the facility relies on advanced infrastructure, technology, and specialized staffing. The building's design, electronic monitoring systems, and controlled access protocols reduce certain types of staffing demands but introduce new operational costs. Surveillance networks, secure doors, and control rooms must be maintained and monitored constantly. Staff training is intensive, emphasizing precision, protocol adherence, and coordination with automated systems. Financially, ADX Florence is significantly more expensive per inmate than most other federal facilities. Operating a high-tech, high-security environment requires both upfront investment in infrastructure and ongoing maintenance. Specialized housing units, climate control, and technological upgrades add to the cost. Yet these investments are justified by the need to contain individuals who require the highest security levels while minimizing risk to staff, the public, and other inmates. Both Alcatraz and ADX Florence demonstrate that maximum security carries a premium. Alcatraz's costs stemmed largely from geography and logistics, while ADX's costs arise from technology, infrastructure, and staffing requirements. Each reflects a philosophy of investment. Alcatraz invested in isolation and direct oversight. ADX invests in precision, technology, and controlled movement. Operationally, both facilities rely heavily on routine and protocol. Alcatraz emphasized human observation and regimented schedules, while ADX integrates technological systems with standardized procedures. Despite differences in approach, both models illustrate the core principle of maximum security operations. Predictability, oversight, and a structured environment are essential to maintain order. By comparing cost and operational strategies, we gain insight into how maximum security institutions have evolved. Alcatraz and ADX Florence serve as examples of how corrections policy adapts to resources, technology, and societal priorities. They show that achieving extreme security requires not only physical barriers or advanced systems, but also careful planning, trained personnel, and consistent operational management. Beyond their walls and security features, Alcatraz and ADX Florence have left distinct marks on public perception and culture. Each institution became more than just a prison. They became symbols of their time, reflecting society's ideas about incarceration, security, and control. Yet the way the public interacts with and understands these facilities is very different. Alcatraz has become a cultural icon. After it closed in 1963, the prison transitioned from a functional correctional facility to a major tourist destination. Visitors from around the world explore the island, touring the cell blocks, dining halls, and guard stations. Its reputation for maximum security, combined with stories of notorious inmates and escape attempts, contributes to a sense of historical fascination. Films, books, and documentaries have further cemented Alcatraz in popular culture, emphasizing both its architectural uniqueness and its role in 20th century corrections. This public legacy is not just about storytelling. Alcatraz serves as an educational site where visitors can learn about federal incarceration, prison life, and the historical context of the United States correctional system. Exhibits highlight daily routines, historical documents, and photographs of the island during its operational years. The combination of tangible structures and cultural narratives allows Alcatraz to function as both a museum and a symbol of high-security incarceration. ADX Florence, on the other hand, maintains a much more private legacy. As an active maximum security facility, it is largely inaccessible to the public, and its notoriety is derived primarily from media reports, policy discussions, and the facility's reputation for precision and control. The public's understanding of ADX Florence focuses on its operational philosophy, technological systems, and the federal approach to managing high-risk inmates. Unlike Alcatraz, it is not a tourist site or cultural icon in the traditional sense. Its legacy is built around its function as a model for contemporary maximum security operations. The contrast between the two legacies reflects broader shifts in corrections and public perception. Alcatraz illustrates how a prison can become part of cultural memory, tied to stories, architecture, and historical events. ADX Florence represents modern corrections, where operational efficiency, security, and controlled access define public perception more than cultural storytelling. Together, they provide insight into how society views extreme security, one through history and myth, the other through policy and practice. Both facilities also demonstrate the role of legacy in shaping public understanding of incarceration. Alcatraz educates through experience, showing how isolation and routine were managed historically. ADX Florence informs through its example in contemporary corrections, influencing policy discussions, security design, and federal prison standards. They remind us that prisons are not only operational spaces, but also symbols of societal priorities and evolving ideas about safety and justice. Ultimately, the public legacy of Alcatraz and ADX Florence underscores the evolving relationship between correctional institutions and society. One captures the imagination of the world, the other influences the standards of modern security. Together, they illustrate that maximum security prisons leave a lasting impact far beyond their walls, shaping perceptions, policies, and cultural memory for generations. When comparing Alcatraz and ADX Florence, the question often arises, which prison was truly more secure? The answer is not straightforward because each facility was built for different times, technologies, and correctional philosophies. Examining their design, operations, and purpose allows us to understand security not as a single measure, but as a combination of factors that evolved over decades. Alcatraz relied on isolation, human oversight, and structured routines. Its island location provided a natural barrier that few other prisons could replicate. Thick walls, guard towers, and strict schedules ensured that inmates were constantly monitored. For the 1930s and 1940s, this system was effective. Escapes were rare, and the combination of environmental isolation and strict supervision created a facility that became famous for being nearly inescapable. In its era, Alcatraz represented the pinnacle of correctional security. ADX Florence, however, reflects the evolution of security in a modern context. Built in the 1990s, it incorporates advanced architectural design, electronic monitoring, and controlled movement protocols. The facility minimizes unsupervised interactions and uses technology to maintain constant observation. In terms of operational precision, ADX surpasses what Alcatraz could achieve, simply because modern tools allow for far greater oversight. Its design is purpose-built to house the most high-risk inmates safely and efficiently, reflecting contemporary standards of maximum security incarceration. The question of which is more secure depends largely on context. If we evaluate security based on the technology, control systems, and modern risk management practices, ADX Florence is clearly superior. Its systems allow staff to monitor virtually every area in real time and enforce protocols consistently. On the other hand, Alcatraz's strength lay in its physical isolation and human supervision, which were highly effective in its own time. Each facility was the product of its era, excelling in security relative to the challenges and resources available. Another factor is operational philosophy. Alcatraz's security depended heavily on staff vigilance and predictable routines, whereas ADX integrates technology to reduce reliance on human observation. This shift reflects a broader evolution in corrections. Security is now achieved through redundancy, precision, and engineered environments, rather than solely through presence and geography. Ultimately, the comparison shows that security cannot be measured by a single metric. Alcatraz and ADX Florence both represent extreme security, but in different ways. Alcatraz was secure through isolation and direct human control, while ADX is secure through modern technology, architecture, and procedural rigor. Each illustrates the standards of maximum security prisons in its era and the priorities of the correctional system at the time. The analysis also provides insight into the evolution of corrections policy. High-security facilities adapt to changes in technology, inmate classification, and societal expectations. While Alcatraz remains iconic for its historical and cultural impact, ADX Florence demonstrates how contemporary facilities meet today's security demands. Comparing the two reminds us that maximum security is not static. It evolves alongside society, technology, and operational philosophy. Alcatraz and ADX Florence stand as two of America's most famous high-security prisons, each reflecting the era, technology, and philosophy of its time. Alcatraz remains a symbol of isolation, human supervision, and the dramatic history of early 20th century corrections. ADX Florence, in contrast, represents modern maximum security design, combining advanced technology, architecture, and precise procedures to manage today's highest-risk inmates. By comparing these two institutions, we gain a clearer understanding of how correctional systems have evolved and why security takes different forms depending on context. While one captivates the imagination through history and cultural impact, the other illustrates the efficiency and rigor of modern prison management. If you found this comparison insightful, consider subscribing for more educational documentaries exploring prisons, corrections history, and security design. Hit the like button to show support, and share your thoughts in the comments. Which approach to maximum security do you find most fascinating? Historic isolation or modern engineering?